Welcome, everyone, and thank you for joining today's informational webinar on the Pennsylvania Commission on Crime and Delinquency's Improving Justice System Responses to Opioid Use Disorder, Stimulant Use Disorder, and Related Substance Use Disorders. My name is Mike Pennington, and I serve as Executive Director of PCCD. I'm also joined today by several other PCCD team members who will be supporting today's webinar, including members of our executive, program, and fiscal staff. We're also co-hosting today's informational session with our partners at the Pennsylvania Department of Drug and Alcohol Programs. One of the cornerstones of our work at PCCD is building collaborative partnerships at the state and local levels. The funding opportunity we'll present on today is a great example of that principle in action. We know that the intersections of the justice system and opioid stimulant and other substance use disorders are significant and well documented. National studies and data here in Pennsylvania show that the majority of incarcerated people have an active substance use disorder. Data from our state's intermediate punishment program conducted in 2020 by the Pennsylvania Commission on Sentencing also cites substance use as an important driver of supervision violations and incarceration. We also know from studies in Allegheny County and nationally that a significant majority of people who died from an overdose were actively or recently involved with the justice system. People who were recently incarcerated are between 40 and 129 times more likely to die from an overdose in the first 2 weeks following their release compared to the general public. These statistics demonstrate the important role the justice system plays in responding to opioid stimulant and related substance use disorders, as well as the urgency of the investments and efforts we'll discuss here today. With those remarks aside, I'll turn the floor over to Sam Cook to walk us through some housekeeping rules and advance us further along in our agenda. So thank you.
Thanks so much, Mike. All right, so I wanted to start with a couple of housekeeping rules and a few reminders. This webinar is being recorded and will be posted on PCCD's YouTube channel once it becomes available. We do encourage you to check your audio settings to make sure you're able to hear today's presentation using your computer or other device. Please note that we cannot hear you. However, you will be able to submit questions through the Q&A feature in the live event platform. Questions that are submitted through this feature will not be visible to all participants, but please rest assured that they will be received and reviewed by our staff. PCCD staff have allotted some time at the end of the webinar to answer questions that have been submitted by participants through that Q&A feature. To the extent possible, any questions that we're not able to address in today's webinar will be answered on the Q&A section of PCCD's website. And we do also want to note that a copy of PowerPoint slides from today's session will be made available afterwards for participants. Moving towards the rest of our agenda, we'll provide a brief overview of our two agencies, and then we'll provide an overview of the Improving Justice System Responses to Opioid Stimulant and Related Substance Use Disorders funding announcement that was recently opened by PCCD. And that'll include a review of information about the grant program's goals, eligible applicants and activities, as well as funding priorities. We'll also go through some of the process and timeline for requesting funds through the grant program, including walking through how to get started in PCCD's Egrants system. And finally, as noted before, we will reserve a couple of minutes at the end of the webinar to answer any questions that have been submitted by participants using the Q&A feature. And so with that roadmap ahead of us, we'll go ahead and get started. And I'd like to turn things over to DDAP to share a little bit about their agency. DDAP, take it away.
Good afternoon. It's a real pleasure to be here with you today. My name is Ellen DiDomenico, and I am the Deputy Secretary for the Department of Drug and Alcohol Programs. As Mr. Pennington said, we're really excited about the partnership between the two agencies, and that really fits very, very well with the belief of DDAP that we shouldn't be recreating the wheel when there are good things happening in other places, but we should figure out how it is that we can support those efforts. Sam, would you mind moving to the next slide? Thank you. Just a little bit of overview of what DDAP is for those of you who have not worked directly with us. So our mission is to engage, coordinate, and lead the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania's efforts to prevent and reduce drug and alcohol and gambling addiction and abuse. That's an unknown to many folks that we also have a role in gambling addiction. And then to promote recovery and reduce the human and economic impact of the disease. We really operate from the position of 4 strategic goals with a lot of particular activities under each of those: reducing the stigma of substance use, looking at how we can improve the primary prevention activities. Again, we partner with PCCD in that role with some of our school-based efforts to really strengthen the treatment system and to empower sustained recovery. So within the scope of those 4 goals of the department, we actually have a variety of activities. So under that agency activities, we have sections focused very specifically on the development of our service system. So the substance use disorder system, while it's been around in an informal way, it has not necessarily been a formal service in many parts of the country for a very long time. It's been, a much shorter time than many of the other services that were available. So we're really looking consistently and strategically around how we develop a full service system. A piece of that is that interface with the criminal justice system that we want to talk about today. We are really focusing on quality assurance efforts, and that looks like both improving the quality of treatment services as well as the training opportunities that we offer in terms of prevention, intervention, and treatment service providers. We have a responsibility for licensing all treatment activities in the Commonwealth, just about 800 providers of treatment that we license on an annual basis. And a new foray for us just in the current year in 2022, where we have begun to license providers of recovery house services. That was new opportunity that we were given legislatively. And we are currently up to over 250 licensed providers in that space. And then county program oversight. We ask that you all engage with your single county authorities. While we are considered the state agency, the single state agency for substance use disorder, we partner directly with the counties and the county level programs that we call single county authorities. And there are 47 of them in the Commonwealth that we actually contract with for a variety of services. And they are the very important local entity that we would ask you all to be thinking about how you partner with them. They have funding for a variety of initiatives, and we think that there would be a good interface between those things. How we accomplish all that work, because we're a relatively small agency, is really to think about this from the perspective of those things that we do directly, those things that we do in partnership with our single county authorities, and those things that we do in partnership with other state agencies. So we provide a significant amount of funding to the single county authorities around treatment, prevention, and intervention services, particularly treatment services for the uninsured and underinsured that are funded at the local level. So there should not, in this time where we're blessed by having a lot of additional federal funding coming in, there should not be a time when the concern is of, do we have enough funds for our treatment? We might have to look at how we do that and move some dollars around, but funding for treatment has been fairly significant over the last couple of years. We also have certain expectations of those counties in terms of the prevention services and the intervention services, community needs assessments, and a new growing area in terms of thinking about recovery supports, how we support individuals past just the initial clinical treatment and think about the long-term life of somebody in recovery. Secondly, we partner with other state agencies. We don't, as I said earlier, we don't want to recreate the wheel. So we partner with the Department of Corrections in terms of the treatment for individuals within the state correctional system. We partner with the DMVA in terms of working with them around making sure that our veterans receive the treatment and recovery supports that they may need. And we have other strategic opportunities then that we look at with our other sister agencies across the Commonwealth, including a significant amount of work that we do with the Pennsylvania Commission on Crime and Delinquency. And then finally, we do some direct grant applications. And so for those of you who are in the timeframes of looking for particular opportunities, please visit DDAP's website because you will see other opportunities that might support your local work that you can apply for as those funds become available. So again, we're very excited about the opportunity today. We've had a lot of conversations with PCCD to think about a more comprehensive look at improving the justice system response to substance use disorder. We've done in the past a lot of one-off grants for either, medication-assisted treatment in county corrections or work with problem-solving courts. But this is really an opportunity that we think is important because we're hoping that counties will embrace the idea of really developing a system response. And we want to help to fund that as you move to developing that. So with that being said, I'll turn it back and thank you all for being here and looking forward to interacting with you.
Thanks so much, Ellen. So now a little bit about our agency, the Pennsylvania Commission on Crime and Delinquency, or PCCD as we're more commonly known. For folks who may be less familiar with our agency, we are a relatively small but growing state agency that's housed in the executive branch. Our mission is to enhance the quality, coordination, and planning within the criminal and juvenile justice systems to facilitate the delivery of services to victims of crime and to increase the safety of our communities. As part of our agency's charge and responsibilities, we administer a wide range and variety of state and federal funding sources, as well as provide technical assistance for a number of programs and initiatives. We also serve as a statistical resource for criminal justice and public safety data, and our agency is also responsible for administering Pennsylvania's victim compensation program and also supports a range of victim services across the Commonwealth. And we're also tasked with administering training programs, including for constables, sheriffs and deputy sheriffs, county probation officers, and other justice-related stakeholders. So if you're interested in learning more about our agency's work, we'd certainly encourage you to check out our website at www.pccd.pa.gov. So one of the resources that you'll find if you check out our website is the agency's 2021 to 2025 strategic framework, which was adopted by our commission in 2020. That document provides a roadmap for PCCD's strategic priorities, as the name suggests, and that includes a commitment to invest in ideas and strategies that improve systems and help make Pennsylvania communities safer for everyone. One of the agency's top strategic priorities is improving coordination of and access to services for individuals with mental health, behavioral health, intellectual disabilities, and/or substance use disorders who interact with the systems that our agency engages and supports. And we're also committed to increasing the effectiveness of state and local efforts to prevent crime and increase public safety through interagency planning and collaboration, as Mike mentioned at the start of our session today. So the Improving Justice System Responses to Opioid, Stimulant, and Related Substance Use Disorders funding opportunity that we'll discuss here today is, I think, a prime example of these two strategic priorities in action. So now that you know a little bit more about who we are, let's move towards the grant program that you're all interested in learning more about, which is the Improving Justice System Responses to Opioid, Stimulant, and Related Substance Use Disorders Solicitation. So a little bit of background, as you may know, Pennsylvania was eligible for approximately $80.7 million in federal state opioid response, or SOAR, funds this fiscal year. DDAP is responsible for administering SOAR funds for the Commonwealth and provides subawards to agencies and entities for approved programs that are aligned with that funding's goals and objectives, as Ellen just described. So on December 6th, PCCD, in partnership with DDAP, announced the availability of up to $8 million in SOAR funds to support a new initiative. And this program was really designed to expand access to evidence-based supports for justice-involved people with opioid use disorder, stimulant use disorder, and/or related substance use disorders. And this funding is also intended to enhance coordination among key systems within counties to improve outcomes for people with opioid use disorder, or OUD, stimulant use disorders, or related SUDs and co-occurring disorders who might come into contact with the justice system. So as Mike mentioned in his opening remarks, we know obviously there is a significant and urgent need for continued and increased investments at the local level that seek to address the intersections of opioid, stimulant, and other substance use and involvement in the justice system. So PCCD and its partners at DDAP, have made significant investments in recent years in this space, including leveraging SOAR funding and a variety of other funding sources to address areas like prevention, intervention, rescue, response, and recovery. And over the past 4 years and change, the agency has released a number of competitive solicitations for counties and other entities in areas like drug courts and pretrial diversion, as well as county jail-based medication-assisted treatment. So these efforts in partnership with local leaders have helped make progress in some pretty important ways. As one example, in fiscal year 2018-19, PCCD's jail-based MAT grant served approximately 154 individuals across Pennsylvania. In the last fiscal year, 2020 to 2021, 2,519 individuals were served through these programs. That represents a 1,635% increase. So again, more work to do for sure, but we're proud of the inroads we've been able to make in partnership with our sister agencies and certainly folks at the local level. So as we considered ways to use new SOAR funding to build upon this progress in partnership with our friends at DDAP, we knew we wanted to take a different approach. So in the past, SOAR funding opportunities that were offered by PCCD were structured in a very program-specific manner, typically requiring counties or other eligible applicants to submit multiple separate applications under unique funding announcements. So with this new initiative, we are trying to take a more streamlined approach that provides counties and partners with the opportunity to request funding for a broad range of programs and activities designed to improve outcomes for justice-involved people with opioid stimulant use disorder related SUDs within a single solicitation. And as we mentioned earlier, this funding opportunity is really designed to expand access to evidence-based supports and improve coordination within counties for people with substance use issues who are interacting with the justice system. Under this solicitation, counties and nonprofit organizations with 501c3 status are eligible to make application, and it is a competitive funding announcement. Eligible applicants are able to request up to $500,000 total to support proposed project activities over a 21-month project period. So that would run from April 1st, 2023 through September 29th, 2024. So grant funding can support a wide range of strategies and initiatives aligned with funding announcements, goals, objectives, and priorities, as we've alluded to before. And in the spirit of collaboration and coordination, applications must also be developed with or supported by the Criminal Justice Advisory Board, or CJAB, and the Single County Authority, or SCA, that's relevant to the proposed project's service area or areas if you are covering more than just one county. So we mentioned that funding can be used for a wide range of activities, and this slide provides some examples of what we mean when we talk about that wide range. These are just a few potential approaches and programs that folks could come in for funding for, but it's certainly not limited to what you see here or what's included in the written funding announcement. So that list can include comprehensive diversion programs that identify people with opioid use disorder, stimulant use disorder, or co-occurring disorders who are interacting with the justice system, and redirecting them from arrest or incarceration via linkages to community-based treatment and other supports. It could include problem-solving courts, including drug courts, serving adults and juveniles, embedding community services such as treatment services, for instance, MAT or MOUD, as well as cognitive behavioral therapy within pre-booking or pre-arrest response protocols, individualized transition planning for folks detained in jail and awaiting adjudication, again, including those linkages to community-based treatment resources and support services such as housing, supported employment, trauma services, integrated treatment for SUD and co-occurring mental health and other issues. Advancing harm reduction strategies and peer recovery supports. We know how important that can be in terms of long-term success for folks. This can include models like the certified peer recovery specialists that are specifically focused on individuals who are recently released from jail and other vulnerable justice-involved populations. Funding could also support co-response models, diversion outreach, and other law enforcement-led interventions and supports. It could embed services within correctional settings to reduce barriers to care. We're also interested in supporting initiatives that pilot or expand coordinated systems of care for individuals with substance use disorders, such as one-stop shop initiatives or models. And funding can also be used to support training and professional development for relevant justice-related and behavioral health practitioners, for example, judges, law enforcement officers, treatment providers, etc. And so worth noting that applicants will be asked to identify the category or categories from the list above within eGrants that are most applicable to the project that they are proposing. There is, I believe, an other category as well, and certainly folks can feel free to select more than that and provide additional strategies within their funding request. So as you develop your applications and prepare things like project budgets and work plans, we just wanted you to be mindful of a few required grant activities under this funding announcement. So under this solicitation, applicants need to demonstrate that they have a comprehensive plan or must include a planning period within their application in order to apply for funding. If one hasn't already been completed, projects must conduct an inventory or assessment of available funding, services, resources, and programs that are currently available within the proposed service area, as well as identify any barriers or gaps that may exist. If a plan has already been completed, applicants are asked to provide that as an attachment or link within their application for reference. And again, if you don't have that in place, that's something you build in within your proposal. Ultimately, applicants are asked to connect project proposals with local needs and priorities, again, as demonstrated by available data, local strategic planning and assessments, etc. The second requirement we wanted to flag, and this is really aligned with our commitment to interagency planning and collaboration, PCCD is requiring that applicants demonstrate that proposed projects and applications have been developed with and/or supported by their relevant criminal justice advisory boards and single county authorities. So applicants should include relevant letters of support and commitment or similar documentation of that coordination and support within the attachment section of the eGrants application. And the goal of these partnership requirements is really to ensure that the strategies supported through these grants are identified and deployed with the necessary buy-in and resources from key stakeholders within a given community, and certainly to minimize duplication of efforts. And as Ellen so eloquently put it, building wheels that already exist. We certainly want to make sure that these are aligned with all the other good work that's happening at a local level. So in terms of the specifics of activities and expenses that can be supported with grant funding, so funds can support expenses associated with direct project activities and program implementation, including but not limited to what you see on the screen here. So that includes salaries and benefits for personnel, either full or part-time, contractors and consultants, supplies and equipment, training expenses, travel and transportation expenses, indirect costs that do not exceed federally approved rates or de minimis 10%, and any other activities necessary to meet the needs of programs and participants. We strongly encourage applicants to carefully review the written funding announcement, paying particular attention to page 8, which provides a more detailed description of eligible program activities and expenses, as well as important information about requirements and conditions of federal SOAR funds. So again, page 8 has a little bit more information on that front. So we've talked about what grant funds can pay for. We now want to discuss the types of activities and expenses that grant funds cannot support. So as noted on this slide, grant funds may not be used for construction, land acquisition, lobbying and political contributions, honoraria or bonuses, food or refreshments, funding personnel that are not deemed to be integral to the program's implementation, promotional items, including but not limited to things like clothing, commemorative items, mugs, cups, folders, folios, lanyards, that kind of stuff. And any expenses that fall significantly outside of the scope of this funding announcement or that conflict with federal SOAR funding conditions. So again, the written funding announcement document provides a lot more detail regarding these ineligible program activities and expenses. Those details are provided on pages 8 through 9 of the written funding announcement. I do want to note that PCCD, in our standard process, we do reserve the right to have approved applicants remove or reduce items from the proposed budget that are deemed ineligible or not sufficiently related to the project. And we do have approval of all final budgets. So now that we've gone through the nuts and bolts of the funding announcement, we wanted to spend a little bit of time on the application process. So eligible organizations and applicants should submit an application for funding using PCCD's eGrants system. So grant applications are due by 11:59 p.m. Eastern Time on Thursday, January 12th, 2023. Review, scoring, and final recommendation of projects will be made following the receipt and review of applications in our eGrant system. And so speaking of eGrants, I would like to turn things over to my colleague, Heather Hewitt, to provide some information about getting started in that system and some tips as you navigate creating and submitting an application. So Heather, you want to take it away?
Hey, Sam. Good afternoon, everybody. The first step is in the eGrants registration process is to complete a registration for yourself. The link here, Getting Started in eGrants, that is a super helpful web page that has a bunch of different links and guides to get you started. So you don't want to register yourself. Your second step is to register your organization within eGrants. And then your third step is to request roles in eGrants that allow you to have access to your organization so that you can go in, start your application, and do everything that you need to do. Next slide. So the agency registration, there is a request form. It is linked on this page. It's also found on our website under the eGrants link. Your agency must be properly registered in eGrants before you can apply for a grant. And we just noted that it does require a signature, so authorized officials there are persons with contract signing authority, which are generally the executive director or head administrator of the agency. And then the email address is at the bottom of the screen. That is where you can send these to, and the eGrants help desk will give you a response email that kind of gives you some next steps once the agency is registered. Next slide. So there are user roles, as I said, to associate you with your agency, and that allows you to access different parts of the application, such as the budget. So we have a financial creator and a program creator, and both of these roles allow you to view and create fiscal or program information. The financial reader and program reader roles can do just that. They can read, they can view, they cannot edit. The submission role allows users to submit forms, your applications, modifications, all that good stuff. You cannot submit if you do not have that role. And lastly is a user manager. So the user manager does just that, manages roles of the other users. I believe we have another slide on this. So Sam, I'll let you go to the next one. Oh, nope, not yet. So every agency must register 2 users in order to complete their grant application. There are 3 contacts on the application. I believe the financial one and the program one cannot be the same. So you will need to have a separate person or 2 separate people for that. Next slide. So the user manager, as I said, every agency should have this role. They approve requests and maintain existing security for users that are already established within the agency. So the user would need to associate themselves with the agency before the user manager can actually manage their roles. And we do have a great user manager help guide that will walk you through, finding your users' requests and approving them, updating security, all that good stuff. Next slide. And we do have the eGrants help desk. We're available Monday through Friday from 8 to 4. There's the email address and the cell phone, or not the cell phone, the phone number on the screen here. And then we also included a few other useful resources, such as Getting Started in eGrants, the Applicant Resources guides, and then the Grant Application Walkthrough guides. And I believe that's it, and I think I'm turning it over to Chris.
Oh, actually, you're turning it over to me. Oh. But that's okay. Thanks, Heather. I appreciate that. We wanted to take just a couple of minutes to review what is included in the Improving Justice System Responses to Opioid Stimulant and Related Substance Use Disorders application. So again, can't say it enough, reminder that applicants are strongly encouraged to carefully read and review the written funding announcement document before you start your eGrants application. It will make your life a whole lot easier, and definitely encourage you to check out those eGrants related resources that Heather just described. So the eGrants application is structured in a few major sections, and we're going to just walk through those at a high level in the next couple of slides. So the first section that you're going to be asked to complete is an executive summary. So applicants should provide a brief synopsis on your proposed project using the script and template language that's available in Egrants. The next section of the application is an applicant overview. So that's going to just ask you for some more information about the organization making application, as well as any project partners that would be instrumental in the implementation of your proposed project activities. The third section is going to focus on the proposed project's target areas and populations. So applicants should use this section to really describe kind of where project activities will primarily take place, including why that particular location and geographic area was chosen as the focal point. You'll also be asked to provide a little bit of information about some of the target populations that your project would seek to reach or serve, as well as a description of need. So why is it that funding is necessary at this time? What gaps would be addressed, or other types of need statements within that section. So in terms of the bulk of your application, the project description section of Egrants is really where you're going to get into the nitty-gritty of your proposed project design. So just wanted to start with the caveat at the top. You can see that reminder. All applicants do need to demonstrate that they have a comprehensive plan, or again, need to include that planning period within their application in order to apply for funds. So within the project description section, you're going to be kind of giving us some information around whether or not those planning activities have occurred to date, or if this will take place in the early phase of the project period. Further information provided in this section kind of depends on whether or not you already have a plan completed, or if a planning period will be part of the proposed project. So again, just ask that you follow instructions and respond to the appropriate sections within Egrants, depending on what situation you fall into. If you do have a planning and needs assessment already in place, we're going to ask you a little bit about kind of what needs were elicited from that process. You'll also be asked to provide an indication of the types of programs and activities that you would be seeking funding to support. That was that list of activities that I mentioned earlier on. You'll also be asked to provide a description of any additional funding sources, whether from PCCD or DDAP or any other sources that have supported these types of activities or similar activities in the past, and why, again, this funding would be necessary to either expand upon those efforts or build upon them further. Recognizing that workforce challenges are definitely a reality, we do ask that applicants provide a brief description of their plan for hiring, onboarding, and training key personnel. And this is an opportunity to really describe, again, with a level of recognition that this is something that everyone is struggling with currently, how your organization or agency has dealt with some workforce challenges in the past, how you've overcome those, and what your plan for using funding to support new or existing personnel will look like as part of proposed project activities. We also ask for some information about how your project would collect required data, and just generally around your capabilities and plan in that space. And then we do ask all applicants as part of this proposal to develop and attach a very short one-page project work plan. And that's going to be where you identify the project's goals and objectives, and also spell out the specific activities that would take place at each stage of the project. So this attachment and the plan should really identify kind of who will be responsible for those activities. For example, if that would be in-house staff within your agency or organization, or if it's something that your partners will be helping to get across the finish line, and providing some start and end dates for each activity. Again, we know that often with applications and plans, right, these can certainly be estimates, but we're just generally looking for a roadmap of sorts of what activities will take place at what points in time and by whom. So the next section of the application is another important one. It's the budget detail. So applicants should include an up to 21-month comprehensive budget that addresses key deliverables and activities for the proposed project in that section. Again, 21 months is the maximum project period. So we're going to ask you to build a year one budget and then add 9 months to that if you're going for the full 21-month period. As we've mentioned previously, you could certainly request funding to support new initiatives, If you are planning to utilize a planning period within your proposed projects, you should just make sure that you provide sort of a placeholder estimate for the types of expenses that you anticipate needing grant funds to support in the project's implementation phase. We will work closely at PCCD with selected projects who fall into this category upon initial approval and onboarding to make sure that budgets meet necessary PCCD criteria. And in addition, all grantees that are meeting this criteria will be asked to submit final implementation budgets following the conclusion of the planning and assessment period. So if you already have a plan in place, just make sure that you're using that project budget to describe specifically what activities would need funding, providing line items and all that good stuff. But again, if you're in the planning category, that's the approach that you should take. So the next thing we wanted to cover was required attachments. So as part of this solicitation, applicants need to include a couple of documents in the attachment section in Egrants. That includes resumes or CVs of key personnel, required documentation of collaboration with or support of relevant CJABs and SCAs, letters of support and commitment or similar documentation for any named project partners. Again, if you've done one already, a copy of that recently completed needs assessment plan, etc. The project work plan, which we already discussed. And then if you are a nonprofit organization, you will need to provide evidence of nonprofit status if applicable, and that typically includes an IRS 501c3 determination letter, among other things. In addition, while not required, you are certainly encouraged to use the attachment section in Egrants to upload other relevant materials that can supplement information that's provided within your application. That can include things like program reports, testimonials, letters of support from other community stakeholders, etc. So under this funding announcement, grantees will also be required to report out on pre-selected performance measures for all grantees and, if applicable, additional subset measures. So you'll notice in the funding announcement that if you are proposing activities that relate to county jail-based MAT as one example, there's a different subset of measures that we'll ask you to do, ditto for pretrial diversion and drug courts. So applicants and grantees will be asked to set targets for those required measures that were already identified by PCCD. It is not required, but if you are desiring to, you are certainly able to develop your own additional performance measures that are related to the specific activities included in your proposed projects. Again, not required, but certainly something you can do if you'd like to. And again, if you are a nonprofit, you're going to need to complete the nonprofit agency checklist section in Egrants. If you are not a nonprofit, please feel free to ignore that. And then all applicants need to complete required signed documents in the signature page in Egrants in order to submit their application. So as you build and work on your application in the Egrant system, we would encourage you to check out resources available for applicants. This is included in the written funding announcement, this sort of snippet of resources. We have a number of walkthrough guides available on our Applicant Resources webpage. We also have some video tutorials that are on our YouTube channel. So lots of ways to figure out kind of how to navigate different parts of building an application in the eGrant system. If you still need help, as Heather noted before, the eGrants help desk is available and can certainly provide supports around technical or system related questions, again, Monday through Friday, by reaching and calling those areas. So if you need help, please let us know. Okay, so as we head towards wrap up in our Q&A portion of today's webinar, let's talk a bit about timeline. So as you know, the funding announcement opened on December 6th. We are clearly here today, December 14th, hosting our webinar. The deadline for submitting written questions for this funding announcement for us to respond to at PCCD will be 2 days before the funding announcement closes on January 10th. The grant application deadline in Egrants, again, is January 12th, 2023 by 11:59 p.m. Eastern Time. We anticipate that recommended projects will be presented for action at our March 8th, 2023 commission meeting, and that would mean an anticipated grant start date of April 1, 2023. So again, in terms of the full implementation date, approved projects would have an end date of September 29th, 2024. So So if you have questions about the funding announcement or the application process, we definitely encourage you to ask them. You can do that in a couple of ways. First, today's informational webinar is certainly a good opportunity to ask for clarification on anything we've covered that you want more detail on. You can again submit your questions for our team using the Q&A feature in Teams, and we'll get to as many of those as we can in the upcoming Q&A portion of today's webinar. You can also email questions to PCCD staff using our Executive Office Resource account. That email address is ra-pccd_executiveofc@pa.gov. Any questions that we receive during today's webinar or via email will be answered, and all Q&As will be posted on PCCD's website for everyone to see. We do encourage you to check out the online funding announcement Q&A webpage before you ask a question. It's entirely possible that we might have already answered it for somebody else. In addition, we encourage applicants to read the online Q&A page for the funding announcement before submitting your application, because again, it is possible that someone else asked a question and we answered it that you didn't know that you needed the answer to. So with all of that, we're going to open the floor up for questions and answers for questions that have been submitted from participants. So again, if you haven't done so already, please use that Q&A feature to submit your questions. PCCD staff have been monitoring those incoming questions, and we'll answer as many as we can in the next couple of minutes. And again, just want a reminder that if there's any questions we aren't able to get to or fully address during today's session, we will be publishing those answers and responses to the extent possible in the Q&A section of our funding website. And finally, just as a friendly reminder, due to the competitive nature of the solicitation, staff won't be able to answer questions related to how a group should specifically answer application questions. And we also won't be able to provide input on whether specific models, programs, or activities would be considered eligible. So with that, I will turn things over to Alyssa, who will start us off with our first participant question.
Hi, everyone. So we have received quite a few questions, so we'll get started. So one of our first questions will be for Sam. So a couple people have actually asked if an SCA can apply, and if they can apply, are they able to apply for multiple counties because they cover a few counties, or would they only be able to submit one if they are eligible?
Well, that's a very good question. So counties and nonprofit organizations are eligible to apply under the solicitation. PCCD's guidelines typically define a county as the actual county itself, not as a department or agency under a county. So typically applications are going to be submitted by county commissioners on behalf of an agency. So again, without knowing too much about the details of how your SCA is structured, I would just say that the county would be the one submitting, and they would need to demonstrate support and buy-in. Certainly, agencies and departments within a county can be included as sub-recipients for proposed activities.
Perfect. And to ask a little bit more about the eligibility piece of that, are for-profits eligible during this funding announcement?
They are not eligible. So again, only counties or nonprofit organizations with 501c3 status are eligible to make direct application. Worth noting, because we get this question quite a bit, nothing would preclude you from including a for-profit entity or some other type of entity as a proposed subrecipient within your budget. Just note that the only types of applicants that can make direct application in the eGrant system are, again, a county or a nonprofit organization with that status.
Okay, perfect. And then we do have a couple questions about time periods. So this question is also for Sam. So for the funding period, can you remind us how long that is and what the start and end date for the funding is?
Sure. So it is April 1, 2023 through September 29th, 2024. And math has never been my strong suit. So if we added up the months incorrectly, I would defer to my smarter colleagues to tell me if 21 months is not the right number. But April 1, 2023, September 29th, 2024 is for sure the correct start and end dates.
Okay, perfect. And then another question about deadline. So deadline for registering an agency or organization, when is that due by?
Yeah, so I would really defer to Heather in terms of her recommendations from an eGrants perspective. We do include some guidelines kind of on the written funding announcement about when we would suggest that folks get set up in different systems. But Heather, do you have any advice or pearls of wisdom on that front?
I would say as soon as possible, just to make it easier on yourself, so you're not, rushing around at the last minute. I know our suggestions are to have registration done, I believe, a week in advance for yourself, and I want to say for the agency, it's a week or two in advance as well. But I would just suggest doing it as soon as possible.
Yeah, and I think that's good advice too, particularly considering that some of this funding announcement overlaps with the holiday season. And so certainly we have our eGrants help desk available, but as is the case this time of year, there certainly may be less folks on our team who are actively working on any given day. And so giving yourself a little bit of extra time, I think is probably sage advice any time of year, but especially this time of year.
Perfect. Thank you both. And then this is also for Sam. So is there a required match?
There is not. Although if you'd like to match funds, certainly able to do so. We do have some additional information on how you can build a match related budget, but it is not required for the solicitation.
Okay, perfect. And then this is also for you. So one person asked if they how would you suggest an applicant move forward in a county with an inactive CJAB?
Yeah, so I would hate to put my colleague Jackie on the spot, but she is our expert on CJABs. I will take a jab at answering that question and then let her correct me if I say any of this wrong. But I would say, certainly if a CJAB maybe hasn't been as active as it once was, using a revamp of the CJAB within a planning stage, I think would certainly be something that would be considered allowable. But I want to let Jackie jump in case there's any other kind of advice or perspective she'd want to provide on that kind of question.
Thanks, Sam. Yeah, I mean, I would certainly agree with Sam that use of some of the planning pieces of this funding could be used for the revamp of the CJAB. I mean, I guess who's ever asking this question can reach out to me offline directly. We can talk about it a little bit more, but yes, I would agree that it would be a good use of the funds to revamp the CJAB if that's the case.
All right, perfect. Like Sam said, you can submit those questions if we weren't able to answer them fully. You can submit those also to the RA account. But now with that said, it looks like we have answered all of the questions. I don't know if anybody has a few lingering ones or additional questions. I'd like to give you a second to put those into the chat, but if not, then I'll turn it over to Sam. I think that concludes the question and answer.
Thanks, Alyssa. And just as a reminder, we will go through and answer any questions if we need a little bit more time on stuff. So definitely check out the link to the funding announcement Q&A webpage. That's going to be a good place to hit refresh on regularly as you continue working on your application. We continue to field more questions from applicants. So we appreciate you all, again, spending a little bit of your afternoon with us, and we appreciate your questions and participating in today's informational webinar. As we mentioned before, a copy of our PowerPoint along with a recording from today's session will be made available for future reference. We'll be sending a follow-up email out to registered participants. We encourage you to check out the additional information and resources that are listed on this slide to learn more about the funding announcement, as well as other related resources and programming. If you have any questions, as Alyssa noted before about this funding opportunity, please send an email to our staff. You can again email us at ra-pccd_executiveofc@pa.gov. Our team will review inquiries and again post answers to questions we receive regarding the grant program on that funding announcement Q&A webpage through Tuesday, January 10th, 2 days before the close of that funding announcement. So thanks again for all your time. Happy holidays to you and yours, and good luck in preparing your application. We look forward to reviewing lots of good applications as we head into the new year. So thanks again. Have a good evening, everyone.